When a man learns the art of detachment after being ignored, he unlocks a dimension of power most people never understand. Detachment is not about being cold. It is not about bitterness. And it is certainly not about revenge. Detachment is about standing firmly in who you are, realizing that your value does not diminish simply because someone failed to recognize it. When you stop seeking approval from someone who chose not to give it, you take back control of your energy. This shift is magnetic. It's subtle, but it's undeniable. People can sense when someone is no longer clinging, no longer desperate, no longer waiting for scraps of attention. And women, in particular, notice it quickly because energy never lies. Think of it this way. When you chase after someone who ignores you, you place them on a pedestal. You make their lack of response mean something about you. You hand over your power by saying, your silence defines my worth. But when you detach, you flip the script. You say with your actions, I am whole with or without your attention. That single decision transforms the entire dynamic. Instead of giving away your energy, you hold it close. You redirect it back into yourself. And the beauty is, women can feel that shift even if you never say a word. It's in your tone. It's in your body language. It's in the way you move through the world. The moment you stop overthinking why she didn't reply, why she didn't notice you, why she chose to withhold attention, you start to free yourself. Because here's the truth. People are drawn to those who are self-assured, not those who beg for validation. When a man detaches, he communicates that his life is bigger than a single moment of being ignored. He communicates that his mission, his growth, his self-respect come before the fleeting approval of another. That kind of stance creates an aura, and women can't help but be intrigued by it. Detachment also builds internal strength. Every time you stop yourself from over-pursuing, every time you resist the urge to send another text, to demand an answer, to seek closure, you train your mind to stand taller. You strengthen the muscle of patience and self-control. That inner discipline shows in how you carry yourself. It shows in how you speak, in how you act, in the energy you radiate. Women don't chase men who crumble at the first sign of rejection. They chase men who remain grounded, steady, and calm no matter what happens. When you detach, you don't withdraw in anger. You withdraw with grace. You are not playing games. You are simply saying, I respect myself enough not to beg for attention. That energy is powerful because it is rare. Most men panic when ignored. They overcompensate. They try harder. They overextend. But the man who detaches understands that his value increases when his attention becomes scarce. Scarcity creates desire. The less available you are to someone who once took you for granted, the more they begin to realize what they are missing. And that realization often flips the dynamic completely. It's not just about women, though. Detachment is a life principle. When you stop clinging to outcomes, stop chasing after recognition, stop demanding validation, you become free. You no longer live in reaction to someone else's behavior. You move from a place of creation, not desperation. You invest your time in becoming more, not in begging to be noticed. And ironically, it's when you no longer need to be noticed that you are noticed the most. Women are highly intuitive. They can sense the man who stands in his power and the man who's trying to buy her attention. They can feel the difference between a man who values himself and a man who only feels valuable when she validates him. Detachment also creates a mystery. When you don't rush to explain yourself, when you don't chase after approval, when you don't beg for answers, you create space. Space makes people curious. Space makes them wonder. Space makes them reflect on your absence. Women start asking themselves, why isn't he chasing me? Why isn't he reacting like every other man? What is it about him that allows him to remain calm while others would be losing control? That curiosity alone becomes attraction. So many men sabotage themselves by overextending. They believe persistence equals attraction, when in reality, excessive persistence often equals repulsion. But the man who detaches understands timing. He knows when to step back. He knows when to protect his energy. He knows when silence is more powerful than 1,000 words. That restraint communicates self-assurance, and self-assurance is irresistible. Detachment is not about ignoring her back or trying to punish her. It's about elevating yourself. It's about saying, my time and my energy are precious, and I will not waste them on someone who does not reciprocate. When a man lives from that place, he becomes magnetic without effort. His presence demands respect. His absence creates longing. And women chase the man who masters that balance because deep down, everyone wants to be around the person who does not need them to feel complete. Silence has a power that very few men truly understand, especially when it comes to relationships and attraction. When you're ignored, the natural impulse is to react, send another message, demand attention, show frustration, or express disappointment. But what happens when you don't react? What happens when you allow silence to be your answer? It communicates something far more profound than words ever could. Silence tells her that you are not desperate for her response. You are not defined by her behavior. And you are not shaken by her attempt to withhold attention. Instead of proving weakness, silence proves strength because it takes restraint and discipline to withhold reaction when everything inside of you is screaming to do the opposite. When a man stays silent in the face of being ignored, he shows composure. That composure is rare, and rarity is attractive. Most men break under pressure. They cave, they chase harder, they try to force an outcome. But silence demonstrates control. Control over emotions, control over impulses, and control over energy. It sends a message, I don't need to prove myself to you. I don't need to beg for your validation. I know my worth, and I choose silence over desperation. That message is clear without being spoken, and it is that unspoken energy that draws people in. Women are intuitive, and they pay attention not just to what you say, but to how you handle yourself in moments of tension. Silence creates contrast. While others may bombard her with texts, calls, or emotional outbursts, the man who remains quiet creates a space that cannot be ignored. That space forces her to notice the absence of your words, the absence of your attention, the absence of your energy. And in that space, curiosity grows. Curiosity is the beginning of attraction. The question forms in her mind, why isn't he chasing? Why isn't he reacting? Why isn't he doing what every other man does? That question is the seed that turns into pursuit. There is also a psychological weight to silence. Words can be brushed off. Excuses can be ignored and pleas can be dismissed. But silence lingers. Silence makes her sit with her own actions. It makes her reflect. It makes her consider whether she misjudged your value. Silence has a way of amplifying itself because in the absence of noise, the mind begins to fill the gaps. She starts thinking about you even when you're not trying to be remembered. That's the paradox. By not chasing, by not explaining, by not speaking, you become louder in her mind than if you had said 100 things. Silence also separates men who operate from need versus men who operate from strength. Need says, I must speak, I must react, I must show her how much I care, even if she ignores me. Strength says, I will not compete for someone's attention. I will not devalue myself by chasing silence. I will remain still and let my presence speak without words. This difference is everything. Women feel it. They can sense when a man is centered versus when a man is scrambling. The centered man is magnetic because he is not rattled. He becomes a source of stability, and stability is rare in a world where most people are reactive. There is also something deeply mysterious about silence. Mystery is powerful because it creates intrigue. When you don't respond immediately, when you don't rush to prove yourself, when you don't reveal every emotion, you become harder to read. And what is hard to read becomes more fascinating. Women naturally chase what they don't fully understand, and silence creates that aura of unpredictability. It shows that you are not governed by her actions. You are governed by your own discipline. That makes you stand out without effort. It's important to understand that silence is not about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about preserving your dignity and showing respect to yourself. Words spoken out of desperation rarely have power. Silence held with strength always does. Silence is restraint, and restraint is a form of discipline that commands respect. By not reacting, you're saying, I value my peace more than your attention. I value my energy more than your recognition. I value my self-control more than my urge to respond. That energy is powerful because it comes from a place of confidence rather than insecurity. When a man practices silence, instead of overreaction, he also saves himself from regret. Think of how many times words spoken in frustration made things worse. How many times chasing made the other person run even farther. How many times proving yourself only lowered your value. Silence prevents all of that. It allows you to respond later if you choose from a place of calm clarity instead of emotional chaos. That alone increases your power because people respect those who control their emotions under pressure. In relationships, silence is often louder than arguments. Silence can end conflicts faster than shouting. Silence can make a bigger impact than demands. Women remember how a man carries himself in moments of tension. If he explodes, he loses value. If he collapses, he loses value. If he remains steady, composed, and silent, he gains value because that steadiness shows emotional mastery, and emotional mastery is rare. Women chase men who embody that because it makes them feel safe, intrigued, and drawn in. A man who places his self-value above external approval walks into every interaction from a place of strength instead of lack. When you rely on another person to confirm your worth, you hand them the keys to your confidence. If they approve, you feel high. If they ignore you, you feel low. You become a puppet pulled by strings of validation. But when you build your sense of value from within through discipline, growth, self-respect, and purpose, you take back that control. You no longer need anyone to tell you that you matter. Because you know it. You carry yourself differently. That energy is undeniable, and it is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess. Women notice immediately when a man seeks their approval. It shows in the way he talks, the way he texts, the way he reacts to silence. It shows in the way he puts her on a pedestal and lowers himself in the process. Approval-seeking energy is heavy. It feels desperate. It feels forced. But when a man's self-worth comes from himself, everything changes. He no longer seeks validation. He shares value. He no longer begs for recognition. He commands respect. His energy is lighter, freer, more magnetic because he is not attaching his worth to someone else's response. This doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean pretending you don't care. And it doesn't mean being dismissive. It means you know your value regardless of how someone treats you. If she ignores you, you are still valuable. If she admires you, you are still valuable. If she leaves, you are still valuable. If she stays, you are still valuable. That inner stability makes you unshakable. And when a man is unshakable, people gravitate toward him because stability is rare. Women especially are drawn to men who do not collapse when ignored, who do not fall apart when they don't receive instant approval, who do not need to be constantly reassured in order to feel whole. When your self-value comes from within, you stop over-investing in those who underinvest in you. You stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop probing. Instead, You begin to attract. You attract opportunities, respect, relationships, and admiration because people can sense that you do not need them to feel validated. That absence of need is powerful. It creates freedom in your interactions. You are not trying to extract energy from others. You are overflowing with energy from within. That is why a man who values himself becomes magnetic. He radiates strength because he is not waiting for permission to feel valuable. Self-value also affects the way you carry yourself physically and emotionally. Your posture changes, your tone changes, the way you walk into a room changes. There is confidence in the way you speak when you are not seeking approval. There is calmness in the way you listen when you don't feel the need to prove yourself. There's presence in the way you stand because you are not trying to convince anyone of your worth. You simply embody it. That presence is attractive and it cannot be fake. It comes from doing the inner work, from building yourself up, from creating a life that excites you regardless of who notices. Women chase men who are on their mission, men who are building something, men who live with a sense of purpose bigger than any single interaction. When you focus on your purpose instead of her approval, you create a gravitational pull. She feels the difference between a man who is lost and a man who's guided by vision. A man who values himself is always guided by vision because he knows that his life has meaning beyond whether one person chooses to give him attention or not. That mindset sets him apart instantly. When you seek approval, you place yourself in a position of weakness. You give her the power to validate or invalidate you. But when your self-worth is unshakable, you flip the dynamic. You invite her into your world instead of trying to force yourself into hers. She notices that you don't bend just to please. She notices that you don't change your standards to be accepted. She notices that you remain who you are whether she praises you or not. That consistency builds trust, and trust builds attraction. Approval seeking is exhausting because it's endless. Even if she gives you attention today, you'll crave more tomorrow. And if she withholds it again, you'll feel the cycle repeat. True self-value breaks that cycle. When you are full within, you don't crave the hit of external validation. You enjoy it if it comes, but you are not defined by it. That level of independence is magnetic because it shows maturity. It shows emotional strength. It shows that you are not like the majority who crumble under the weight of being ignored. Every man must come to the point where he realizes that the most important approval he will ever need is his own. When you approve of yourself, you don't beg anyone else to do it for you. You live by your standards, you move by your vision, and you measure yourself by your progress. That is why women chase the man who values himself over external approval, because his energy tells the world, I know who I am, and I don't need you to complete me. That type of certainty is magnetic, and it always draws people back toward it. When you pull your energy back after being ignored, something powerful begins to happen that most men don't recognize at first. Human interaction runs on energy exchange. Attention, focus, time, and emotional investment are all forms of energy. When you are constantly giving your energy to someone who is not giving it back, you create imbalance. But the moment you stop, the moment you withdraw, a shift occurs. Nature apples a vacuum. When something that was once consistent suddenly disappears, it creates an empty space that demands to be filled. That is when curiosity, longing, and pursuit begin to take shape. Women especially feel that vacuum strongly because they become aware of the absence of something they once took for granted. In relationships and attraction, energy is everything. When you are overly available, when your attention is constantly flowing toward her, no matter how she responds, it loses value. It's like water pouring endless. It becomes common, ordinary, expected. But when that flow is cut off, when the faucet of energy stops running, she notices the stillness. She notices the silence. She notices the absence of what she once overlooked. This is not manipulation. It is simply a universal principle. When something becomes scarce, it becomes valuable. And the man who learns how to protect and direct his energy wisely becomes valuable without having to force anything. Withdrawing energy does not mean anger, bitterness, or hostility. It means choosing not to invest in a place where your energy is not respected. It means saying my attention is value, and if it is not being reciprocated, I will not continue to give it away freely. That kind of discipline is magnetic as it is rare. Most men panic when ignored. They double down. They chase harder. They try to prove their worth through overinvestment. But that only communicates lack, and lack never attracts. By stepping back, you communicate fullness. You communicate that your world is bigger than a single person's attention. You communicate that your time and energy are treasures, not cheap commodities. The vacuum effect is psychological. When she no longer receives your constant presence, she begins to feel the contrast. Contrast is what sparks awareness. If you have always been available and suddenly you are not, she begins to ask why. That question leads to reflection. Reflection leads to realization. And realization often leads to pursuit. She may not admit it at first, but she begins to miss the energy she once dismissed. This is why so many men who learn detachment suddenly notice women reaching back out. It is not because they begged for attention, because they stopped giving attention away freely and allowed the vacuum to do its work. This principle works because humans crave what they do not have. The energy you once gave was filling a space in her life, whether she admitted it or not. When you pull that back, the space remains, and people are naturally drawn to fill spaces that feel empty. Your absence becomes a present. Your silence becomes a statement. Your detachment becomes a magnet. That is why the man who learns to manage his energy correctly finds himself being chased instead of doing the chasing. He creates a space for attraction to flow back toward him. It's also important to understand that withdrawing energy is not passive. It is active. It is an intentional choice to redirect your focus. You are not just pulling energy away from her. You are reinvesting it into yourself, into your goals, your health, your growth, your mission. This reinvestment amplifies the effect because not only does she notice the absence of your energy, but she also begins to notice the results of where you are now placing it. You look stronger. You move with more confidence. You speak with more certainty. That growth becomes even more attractive because it proves that you are not waiting around for her validation. You are building without it. Women chase men who know how to create this dynamic because it forces them to rise to the occasion. When you stop overgiving, you force her to decide if she values your presence enough to match your energy. If she doesn't, she drifts away, which reveals the truth of her intentions. If she does, she steps forward because she recognizes that your energy is no longer guaranteed. Either way, you win because you are no longer trapped in the cycle of overinvestment. Energy is the most valuable currency in human relationships. Words can be faked, appearances can be manipulated, but energy does not lie. The man who pours his energy into himself and only gives it where it is reciprocated becomes powerful. He is not easily accessible, and that scarcity raises his value. He is not constantly chasing, and that calmness makes him more desirable. He is not desperate for attention, and that confidence makes him stand out. When a woman feels the vacuum of his absence, she chases not because he forced her to, because the natural laws of energy pull her back toward what she once overlooked. When a woman ignores a man, whether consciously or unconsciously, it is often more than just silence. It can be a test, a probe to see what he is made of. A way of observing whether he is truly as composed as he presents himself to be. In these moments, most men reveal their lack of control. They react too quickly, they explode in frustration. They try to buy back attention with exaggerated effort, or they crumble emotionally and beg for recognition. None of those responses communicate strength. What communicates true strength is composure, the ability to remain calm, steady, and centered under the weight of emotional tests is what separates the man who gets ignored permanently from the man who eventually becomes chased. Composure under emotional test is not about pretending you don't care. It is not about stonewalling or showing no emotion. It is about mastery, choosing not to be a slave to the emotions that rise when someone withholds from you. Emotional mastery is rare, and that rarity makes it magnetic. A man who can stay grounded when others will lose their balance is naturally attractive because stability is something everyone craves, but few people possess. Women especially notice it because composure under pressure speaks louder than anything you could say in moments of peace. Anyone can appear strong when things are easy, but the true measure of a man is revealed when things are difficult. When you maintain composure after being ignored, you send a clear signal you are not easily swayed by external circumstances. Your value does not fluctuate based on someone else's attention. You are not at the mercy of temporary emotions. That kind of steadiness communicates maturity, and maturity communicates safety. Safety in this sense does not mean weakness. It means a woman can feel that you are in control of yourself, and that makes her curious, intrigued, and eventually drawn in. A man who cannot regulate his emotions loses value quickly because unpredictability creates instability. But a man who remains composed communicates a deep sense of control, and control is deeply attractive. This composure also reframes the dynamic of being ignored. Instead of reacting with desperation, you respond with presence. You show that you are not going to chase after someone who is withdrawing their energy. You hold yourself steady, and in doing so, you shift the power of the interaction. While other men fall in the trap of over-pursuit, you create a different experience. You allow her to feel the weight of her own choices. You do not shield her from the consequence of ignoring you, nor do you punish her. You simply remain composed. That balance creates respect. Respect builds interest. Interest eventually builds attraction. The ability to stay composed is also tied to self-awareness. You recognize the temptation to react, but you choose not to. You feel the urge to chase, but you resist it. You hear the inner voice telling you to prove yourself, but you silence it. That act of discipline builds strength within you. Each time you maintain composure instead of collapsing, you are training yourself to operate from power rather than weakness. Women can sense this discipline in your energy, and it distinguishes you from the majority who are ruled by emotion rather than principle. Composure is also attractive because it creates contrast. Imagine the difference between a man who panics after being ignored and a man who remains calm. The first man communicates, "My emotions are dictated by you." The second man communicates, "My emotions are governed by me." That contrast does not go unnoticed. A woman will quickly realize that the composed man is rare, and rarity always carries value. It sets him apart without him needing to shout, beg, or prove anything. His silence and steadiness become louder than another man's desperation. Remaining composed under emotional test also communicates confidence and abundance. It shows that you are not afraid of losing one person's attention because you know you bring enough value to attract attention elsewhere. This does not mean arrogance. It means your self-worth is not tied to one person's approval. That certainly is magnetic. It makes us wonder what it is about that allows you to remain calm, why you are not shaken, and what kind of inner strength you carry. That curiosity leads her back towards you because she wants to understand the energy that sets you apart. What composure ultimately reveals is that you are in control of yourself. You are not easily manipulated, not easily tested, not easily broken. That resilience is deeply appealing because it proves reliability. A woman knows that if you can remain composed under the stress of being ignored, you can remain composed under the bigger pressures of life. That makes you a man worth chasing because stability is rare and stability is valuable. Emotional mastery is not just attractive, it is magnetic because it communicates strength without words, power without force, and control without arrogance. The man who redirects his focus toward his purpose after being ignored steps into a level of power that few ever reach. Most men, when faced with rejection or silence, lose themselves in overthinking. They obsess over why she didn't respond, what they could have said differently, what she must be thinking, or whether they should try harder. That obsession drains them. It takes their time, their energy, and their confidence away from the one thing that can truly transform their lives, their mission. When you learn to shift your attention away from the chase and pour it into your goals, you automatically change the dynamic. You stop orbiting around her and begin to orbit around your vision. That shift is magnetic because women are drawn to men who lead themselves first, men who are guided by direction rather than reaction. Purpose is the foundation of masculine energy. A man without purpose drifts. He becomes overly attached to whoever gives him attention because he lacks something greater to channel his energy into. That attachment makes him weak, needy, and predictable. But a man on purpose moves differently. He wakes up with a reason. He invests his energy in building, creating, achieving, and expanding. His days are filled with growth rather than longing. His energy feels different because it is not consumed by the need for validation. It is fueled by the fire of vision. That fire is what women are drawn to. They don't chase the man who waits around hoping for attention. They chase the man who is busy pursuing something bigger than himself. Redirecting your focus onto your mission also transforms the way you carry yourself. When your mind is engaged in progress, your energy shifts from scarcity to abundance. Instead of wondering why she isn't paying attention to you, you are too busy making moves that matter. That confidence shows in your body language, your tone, your presence. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, and think differently because your life is no longer defined by whether or not one person acknowledges you. That self-reliance is magnetic because it signals that you are whole on your own. And people are always more drawn to those who are whole than to those who are clinging. When you focus on purpose, you also build momentum. Every achievement, no matter how small, builds self-respect. Every time you choose your vision over the urge to chase someone who ignores you, you strengthen your identity. And as your identity grows stronger, your value increases in the eyes of everyone around you. A man with vision is not easily ignored because his presence carries weight. He is not desperate for attention, yet attention naturally gravitates toward him. Women notice this often without being able to explain why. They sense the difference between a man who is distracted by them and a man who is too focused on his goals to be thrown off balance. The latter is the man who stands out, the one who becomes intriguing, the one they end up chasing. Purpose also creates resilience. When you are centered on your mission, rejection no longer devastates you. Being ignored no longer breaks you. You don't crumble because your sense of worth is anchored in progress, not in attention. That resilience communicates strength, and strength communicates security. A woman knows she cannot easily shake a man who is locked in on his purpose. That makes him more attractive because it shows emotional independence. He is not needed to validate him. He is already validated by his mission. That independence creates curiosity and respect because it is the opposite of the desperation most men display when they feel overlooked. The irony is that when you stop chasing and pour into your purpose, you often find yourself being chased. Your growth, your discipline, and your progress become noticeable. She begins to wonder what has your attention, to why you are no longer waiting for hers, and what kind of man you are becoming in her absence. That curiosity can turn into pursuit because now you are no longer the man begging to be seen. You are the man she is trying to keep up with. That reversal only happens when you redirect your energy into your mission instead of wasting it on proving your worth to someone who chose not to see it. Living with purpose also separates you from the majority. Most men get stuck in cycles of distraction, endlessly chasing attention, endlessly trying to prove themselves to women who never valued them. The man with purpose refuses that cycle. He invests his time in creating results, in building his body, his business, his character, his future. Those investments compound, and the results of those choices become undeniable. That undeniable progress is what makes him magnetic. He doesn't need to talk about his value. It speaks for itself through his actions, his results, and his presence. A man who focuses on his mission shows that he has direction. Direction is leadership. Leadership is attractive. Women naturally gravitate toward men who lead because leadership signals strength, certainty, and stability. The man who, after being ignored, chooses to double down on his purpose instead of chasing after attention communicates all three of those qualities without words. His life becomes a demonstration of his worth. He does not beg to be chosen. He creates such momentum that others feel compelled to choose him. That is why the man who stays on his purpose is always the man who eventually gets chased.